The Drink Beer, Think Beer podcast is sponsored by Beer Edge. I'm Andy Crouch, the co-founder of Beer Edge, along with my partner and your podcast host, John Hall. John and I work hard to bring you fresh and insightful content related to the ever-changing world of craft beer. We're passionate about beer and independent journalism. If you're interested in supporting Beer Edge, visit our website, beeredge.com, which is updated regularly with new content, interviews, and articles. Please also consider leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your episodes. You can also subscribe to the Beer Edge newsletter on our website. Is there anyone you think that we should be talking to? Please drop us a line at andy@beeredge.com with your thoughts. And as always, thanks for your support.
I'm John Hall. Welcome to Drink Beer, Think Beer, the podcast that gets to the bottom of every pint. Autumn is in full swing here in the Northeast, and so it seemed appropriate to take a drive, see the leaves, and stop in at Drowned Lands Brewing in Warwick, New York. Owner Mike Kraai is coming up in a minute, but first, this episode is produced by Beer Edge. Check out beeredge.com to sign up for the newsletter, read articles, and find more information about this podcast and the one hosted by Andy Crouch, and more. Plus, don't forget to follow Beer Edge on social media at The Beer Edge, and also to leave a review of this show, Drink Beer, Think Beer, wherever you download podcasts. It's hard to keep up with all that's happening in beer these days. Even before COVID-19 happened, there were so many breweries opening and causing good local stirs that it was tough to follow along with everything. So thank goodness for friends. Over the summer, a pal of mine, Jason Garris, stopped by for some socially distanced driveway beers and dropped off a bière de garde from Drowned Lands, a new-to-me brewery in New York's lower Hudson Valley. It was outstanding. Jason followed up with a few more, including a freshly canned double IPA from the brewery and a lavender saison. Again, outstanding beers. Then, Justin Kennedy, the producer on Steal This Beer, picked up some offerings from the brewery from his local bodega and sent them to me and Augie Carton for Steal This Beer. We enjoyed them very, very much. And so it seemed only appropriate to don some PPE and head north from the house to visit Mike Kraai, the owner of Drowned Lands, to see just what he had going on. And from the moment I pulled up to the meticulously restored century-old building and saw rows of freshly installed fooders from the brewhouse windows, I knew it was going to be a good day. The space is massive, suited for drinking apart during a pandemic. The 15,000 square foot space sits on 3 acres, with large lawns and an ample patio, and even a second floor event space that he hopes to use soon. Mike isn't shy about talking about the nearly $3 million he spent on the renovations and the build-out, and it shows. With a view of the Appalachian Mountains and in a dedicated farmland area, he wants the beers to be a reflection of place, and is trying to make the most out of his state farm brewery license in his state-of-the-art brewery, as well as to play around with traditions. This is my first at the brewery interview for the show since the pandemic upended life. We spoke on a beautiful autumn afternoon at the tasting room at a table next to an open bay door. And you might hear the wind rustle the leaves a little bit and a cement truck towards the end of our chat because there's construction happening in a building across the way. My apologies. Mike's a former CPA, and that's a profession that is usually adverse to risk. Still, he got started at a small nanobrewery before opening Drowned Lands about a year ago, and then opening the taproom just a few weeks back. And so I was curious about risk and fear, and when, in his mind, it was time to move forward with this brewery. Here's our conversation.
I don't know if I would say I embrace the fear, but one of the things, so my wife actually is risk averse, and we're the people that really took on the brunt of this risk. I had to convince my wife to take, a mortgage out on our house. So this was a decision we made together. And I'm
to open up the first brewery.
To open this brewery.
This brewery.
Yeah,
here.
this
Okay.
brewery. Yeah. So one of the things that I would tell her is and one of the things I would remind myself is like, what is the worst case scenario? So for us, and it's not a good scenario, but at the end of the day, the worst case scenario of me quitting my background as a CPA and opening up a brewery and taking out a loan and taking out the whole risk and just the worst thing we're going to lose, the worst case scenario is money. And for me, that's not that bad, So just reminding her of that and myself of that sometimes too, where it's just like, look, we have our health, we have each other. And I'd much rather live with the outcome of we tried this and it didn't work out, as opposed to living with regret and wondering, had I have taken that chance? So to me, it was just like, I guess I went about it a little bit analytically, in the sense of like, A, what's the worst case scenario? And B, what does it look like if I don't go down this road? So that's kind of, I don't know if that's embracing the fear, but that's how I managed the risk and the decision, I guess.
When you started your first brewery and you were nano, and
Yes.
then you very quickly, you told me earlier, you very quickly decided that it just doesn't work. And I'm always sort of amazed when, and I shouldn't be anymore, but like when somebody starts off as a nano and they think like, okay, this is it. Like I'm going to make 2 barrels at a time. I'm going to go from there. Mike Hess out in San Diego, I remember he was one of the very first nanos, as we were calling it. I think he was doing 1 barrel at a time, and he had all these profiles done about him. Like, here's the home brewer with a federal liquor license, a federal brewing license, that kind of thing. And I remember talking to him early on. And he said, I'm never going to do anything else.
Yeah.
I'm always going to be small like this. And then he called me up about 3 months later, and he was like, so I just signed a lease for a 50,000 square foot warehouse, and I bought a 50 barrel brew house. And I'm like, what happened to never, could you have done this without having done the 2 barrel system first? Or is that still a necessary stepping stone for folks who, don't necessarily, start off a career in brewing?
For me, I'm tremendously glad that I did that first, because want to talk about risk a little bit. I mean, the risk on that operation was minimal. I mean, the budget was smaller, just the overall investment in general. So, I don't know I guess theoretically you can do it. But I think you're going to miss some things along the way. One of the things that we do here, and one of the things I really wanted to focus on here, was in general the experience of the consumer at Drownlands.
Yeah.
And if you don't have the experience of actually building a brewery or a bar, but just like hosting people and going down that road, it's really hard to understand what people are gonna connect to, and what works well and what doesn't work well. So for me, I learned a tremendous amount. I learned trial by fire, but at the same time, it just wasn't, the risk reward was great, because it was again, I go back to what was the worst case scenario. It wasn't that big of a deal. We lost a little bit of money. So, I guess the short answer is no. It would not look like this if I did not have a background in somewhat in beer.
So let's talk about where we are right now, because I think anybody who comes here, and I'm going to encourage everybody to do that. This isn't your normal Edison light bulb, beat up couch in the corner, corrugated steel warehouse vibe kind of thing. This is one, we're in a historic building that's a century old. Two, you've really sort of moderned it up in a way with these white painted brick walls and smooth roughed concrete floors, as
Trowel
it were.
finished floor. Yep.
Yeah, but modern furniture and modern light fixtures. Lots of live plants, which is not something that you usually see. The most vegetation you usually see at a brewery is either hops or the other substance that's related to hops.
Sure.
So seeing live plants here is kind of nice as well. It's different from what you had before. Mm-hmm. When did you start thinking about the aesthetic of the brewery?
Really, day one. When I first, so in general, when I was looking for a building and looking to build a brewery, I very much wanted it to be a destination brewery. That's what we're built for. We only have a 15 barrel brew house, which is still relatively small. And so we can't make that much beer. So we want people to consume on premise, right? Because that's a model that works for us. So
that's a model that might have worked in mid 2019, though.
I suppose, I guess, as opposed to 2020, you mean?
Yeah.
Yes.
Like in the middle of a pandemic, like, hey, everybody, come on down and hang out. And you have the acreage. We're sitting in your tasting room, but there's garage doors that are opened up onto your patio, and then a huge field that leads down to the river from there, right? Or the creek from there. So you're not wanting for space.
No, we're not.
But it's also still tough to get people to
feel
comfortable.
Yes. I think for us, the fact that we have 2 acres of licensed property inside or outside, and the outside space flows so well, there's so many windows in here. Once we open up all the garage doors and the windows, it almost feels like you're inside, if that makes sense. So, but yes, I mean, we didn't build this brewery for a pandemic, right? So like our model was not based on, this project started well before then. So, but yeah, I mean, I think when I was looking for a property, it was very much the idea was to have a place that, one, is a place of community. The first beer that we released is called Gather House, which is just this idea that it's like your brewery and your facility is a part of the community. And I love seeing families come here, people with dogs. I mean, it's very much a destination type space. So, I mean, before I was even looking for a building, that's what I was looking for, a property that really spoke to community and a place where people came and can come and just enjoy. And even if you're not a huge beer person, I think people have a great time here and they love the space just because of what it is and the beauty of Warwick, which is pretty breathtaking.
And it is. This is a beautiful part of New York State that folks should go to. And I mean, obviously, there's the orchard around here. Does Doc's Draft? They've been around forever.
Yeah, a lot of orchards.
Yeah, and so it's not unfamiliar for wineries and cideries and other locations. But I'm curious about breweries as gathering spots because maybe it's just 2020 and I miss being at breweries. But by and large, I feel like for a little while, like beer lost its way with that, where it was people were going for special releases or, they weren't necessarily going as like meeting spots, which is what they were designed to be. Showing up here though, you're almost forced to relax. You're almost forced to calm down.
Yeah.
How important is that to the beer drinking experience in your mind?
I think it's just part of the experience. I mean, that's something that we advertise very clearly on our cans. We say 2 things on there that kind of speak to that. One is slow down, stay a while. It's like one of the things that we kind of built our brand around, not just from the way that we make beer, which is what I'm sure we'll get into, but we ferment super slow, we use oak, so we're patient with our beer, but then just the idea of like, take a weekend away, and that's the other thing we say on your can, which is take off your rote, which is just get out of your routine, get out of your day-to-day.
Take off your what? Take
off your rote.
Rote?
Yeah, ROTE.
Okay.
It's just like a saying for like just get out of like your day-to-day. So, I mean, that's just something that we built our brand on, honestly, which is just slow down, stay a while, enjoy the space. And I do think it actually affects the consumption of the liquid, right? I mean, just from a science standpoint, as that beer warms up, the flavor is going to change. So you're going to go through a different experience in that sense. But from the mental piece of it, I just think beer is made to make you relax and to have a conversation, to have a sense of community. So it's like, it's almost like you're doing this, you know what I mean? Like just the slowing down, relaxing. It's like, is the beer relaxing you, or are you coming to relax it? It's like I don't know, cart before the horse, I guess.
So
they go hand in hand for me.
Well, let's talk about your brewery. So this is my first visit here. Yeah. You've been open for a couple of months now, and
almost a couple of months.
A year in brewing, but the tasting room's been open for
5 weeks.
Yeah, 5 weeks now. So just not even 2 months. But pull up, and it's unmistakable to see these great craft fooders that you have. Are there 6 of them that I'm looking
7.
at? Right? There's 7. Oh, that's right. Yeah, 3 and 4. Yep. And they really are a showpiece. You see them when you're getting out of your car. You see them when you're sitting here in the tasting room. Where's the appeal for oak aged? Where's the appeal for you as a brewer because that's a commitment. And we're living, I think, still in an age where it's turn and burn your stainless as fast as possible.
Yes,
You know,
100%.
pilsners are taking off, lagers are taking off. They need time, but it's still, you know, kettle sours and New England IPAs are profitable for a reason. And
Yes.
yeah.
I mean, oak's amazing. Just oak is absolutely amazing. What oak does to beer, I mean, we're sitting drinking Rare Earth, which is our New York Fooder Pilsner. So,
anybody listening to this is shocked that I'm drinking a Pilsner
sorry,
right now.
I blew your cover.
Yeah, it's fine. It's I just want to say, like I said to you, dealer's choice, whatever you want, and you don't know me, and you wanted to pour this, so I'm happy for that. Yeah.
Yes. So, I mean, this Pilsner's unlike any Pilsner you're going to drink. It's oak just does a tremendous amount. I mean, we actually truly ferment in oak too. We don't actually ferment in stainless and then transfer to oak. So that beer is fermented in oak. And as we all know, oak is super porous. So you're just going to have a different fermentation because what's surrounding that vessel is going to change. So for us, Fooder 1 is Rare Earth, and we brew that. It sits in oak for about, the first turn was a little bit shorter because it was the first turn in fresh oak, but that was in there for about 3 months, and then 4 months, excuse me. And then the second batch was 3 months because we excuse me, I said that backwards. The first turn was 3 months because it was fresh oak, so it picked up that oak and tannin really quickly. Yeah. And then the second batch was 4 months. So, and I think I just actually tasted Rare Earth today. I think we'll probably stick with 4 months. I don't think we're going to have to keep pushing that out. But as soon as Rare Earth comes out of that Fooder, we just put it right back in. So that Fooder is Rare Earth for life. It's just a style of beer I was super, super excited to brew and to make and have. It's got this balance of flavor. You get the oak, and it's a lot more bready because in that part of that is the New York malt.
Yeah.
But still a Pilsner, super clean, crisp. It just has like a layer of, we call it roasted marshmallow on there, that we love. So I could talk about oak forever because how does oak change beer? It changes the fermentation. It changes the flavor of the beer. The process is different. It's slower. It's longer. But at the end of the day, it represents drownlands, right? And it goes to this idea of terroir. If you really want to represent terroir and you want to represent your land, I feel like you have to use oak because when we brew that in winter, it's going to be different than when we brew it in summer, and that's okay with us. Like some people might not notice the difference. We might notice a little bit of a difference, and obviously temperature is a huge thing on a Pilsner.
Yeah.
That's just the beauty of it. Like I think the Rare Barrel says it well when they say we don't make the same beer, like consistent beer. We make consistently good beer, which is like, and they know that their barrels are going to change from time to time, and that's kind of our mentality too. We have no problem with a beer representing a specific season or a specific, temperature and time of year. So
I'm always struck with, because I agree with you, but I've also been drinking a lot of beer for a long time, and it's nice to have familiar touchstones on a particular beer. But like, if there is variation in a positive way, that's okay. If there's variation where you don't know what you're going to get from one batch to the next, like that really sucks. But like, is that a tough sell to a lot of consumers, or in the years that you've been doing this, the year here and then previously? Yeah. Has there been a shift in consumer understanding of what it means to be craft or micro or independent or whatever word we're using right now versus, Wonder Bread is always going to taste like Wonder Bread?
Yeah. I mean, I think for us, we have to do a lot of education with our consumer just because people are obviously familiar with IPAs. Everybody knows what an IPA is, but people don't know what a bière de garde is or a grisette or more a lot of these farmhouse styles. Even saison, a lot of people are like, what? So for us, that's one of the things that I think we try to do really well is like all of our servers understand what's unique about our beer. And because the fooders are literally right next to the bar, I mean, you can see them from the tasting room. It's like, people don't know what a fooder is. And we're like, well, look over there. That's an oak vessel. That your beer was fermented in that. And because it was fermented in that, it has these characteristics. So for us, we try to educate people on the farmhouse styles. We still make styles that people are familiar with and approachable. Like, we don't shy away from that either, because I think when you are a destination brewery, like, you can't just have 10 wild ales on tap and then grandma comes in and she's like, what is this, you know? So,
I don't know. I know some grandmas that like to party. That's when you're thinking about oak and you're thinking about your fooders and you're thinking about making a beer de garde, making a pilsner, making a so many of these beers that have become normalized and stainless.
Yeah.
When you're thinking about recipe development, you have to start thinking about the oak first, right?
Yes.
Or no?
I mean,
Yeah.
I think you think about
I led you
yeast
into that
and-
unfairly.
No,
Yeah.
you do. I mean, certain beers you just know need to be an oak, right? Like,
Yeah.
so pretty much. Yeah, no.
Sorry,
So
do you mind if
100.
I-
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
100% of the farmhouse beers that we've brewed have been in oak. So that makes that easy, right? So like if we know we need more farmhouse beer for our menu, like we know we're going to do it in oak. So we don't have to think about that first in that sense.
Yeah.
Of like whether we're going to do an oak or stainless. Like we know we're going to do it in oak, but in terms of recipe development, sure. Like how is that going to impact the flavor of this beer? Absolutely. I mean, that's what recipe development is, right? You want to think about how the various mediums are all going to come together for the finished beer. So, yeah, I mean, our process is relatively simple in the sense that usually it's just me, my head brewer, Travis Lancaster, who's fantastic. We will just go into the tasting room. We'll taste oak. We'll taste, what's in there. And then we're like, okay, this is almost done. And then we start thinking about what goes in next.
Okay,
So,
but unpack that for me, because how do you know when it's like what is it that speaks to you in your mind and your palate? Because obviously what is going to be put out on draft is the representation that you and Travis want it to be.
Yeah.
That you want to represent your place. You're not necessarily speaking to huge grocery store chains or huge volumes, that kind of thing. So is there something when you're tasting oak, when you're tasting the level of oak in certain recipes, is there something that says, okay, that's it, or not quite yet?
Yeah, it just depends on the beer. I mean, some beers you want oak to be dominant, and some beers you want it just to complement other flavors that are in the beer. So we wanted our Foeder Pilsner to be relatively oaky. When you put Foeder Pilsner on the label, like I think people are expecting to taste oak.
Sure.
But you can go too far with that for sure. So in contrast, we have a fest beer in Foeder 2 right now, which we just want to be a little bit cleaner. So we actually just tasted that this morning, and it's not near as oaky as this beer. And we're okay with that. Like it still has, if you look for it, it's there, but it's just, that one this morning was as simple as Travis, like, yeah, I don't really want it to be that oaky. And I'm like, yep, I agree with that. I'm good. Like we tasted it. I'm like, yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, so I guess the short answer is just 100% what we taste and what we like. I mean, I have a friend who says, like, you can go so complicated with beer, and at the end of the day, he's a fantastic brewer, and he just says, does it taste good? Like, and sometimes you just have to come back to that, like, just very simple question, like, we just want this to taste good. What tastes good? And that's kind of the determining factor.
I want to go back to what you were talking about with time, because 3-4 months in a foeder is, for Pilsner, it's a commitment
For sure.
and it changes from when you first make it and to when it comes out as well. But you were also talking about when people are drinking and how it can change from when you first get the glass until the end of the glass and the continuation. Do you think about that when you're building out a recipe? Do you think about how it changes after the fact?
Not really, no. I think about that when I'm serving people beer and I'm trying to understand what type of beer people like and what they're looking for. And I think about that when I'm consuming beer, but from a recipe development, not so much. I guess half of our beer is going into cans, half of it's on draft, so that's a little bit different way of consuming beer.
Yeah.
I personally love to see beer in glassware, so I think cans are a beautiful way of getting beer to the destination and being perfectly carbonated and all those wonderful things. But we love to pour beer in glassware. Me and Travis are both big fans of that.
Yeah.
Open it up, let it breathe, see it, experience it, and then take your time with it and just let it take you through just a little afternoon, and that goes back to the destination piece of who we are. And if you look at our menu, We have a lot of table beers. We have a lot of low ABV, approachable, drinkable beers that are, they're just made to be enjoyed on a Friday afternoon, a Saturday afternoon, and that's like the vision, right? It's just to have people really, again, take off your rote and just like let this be your time. Turn your phone off, like enjoy the outdoors, enjoy the space, kind of transpose into something that's different than your day to day.
Well, if all you were doing was 12% quads or whatever, people would have to be one and done because it's not like there's anything else nearby where we are right now, and people have to get home on their own power, presumably. I don't imagine Uber makes its way out here all that much.
There's no Uber. Yeah.
So does that play?
We get that question a lot, though. There's no Uber, just so you all know.
Does that, or there's like one guy, and you don't want to call him. Trust us. Yeah. It's that kind of thing.
Yes. There's for sure.
But does ABV play into being a destination brewery?
I think so. Yeah, I think so for sure. I mean, we get a lot of people that come right when we open at 12. Like most people don't want to start at 12 with a triple IPA. I mean, I'm sure there
amateurs.
Are people out there.
Yeah, they're called amateurs. Yeah.
So I mean, people show up right at 12 with their kids, and they let their kids run around the beer garden, and they're looking for a Pilsner or our table. We have a bunch of table saisons that are like 3%, 3.5%. So we do, like I think our highest ABV beer we've released is a little over 8.
Yeah.
So it definitely comes into play for a destination brewery for us. I mean, you also have to think about, I guess, the management side of that as well. Like we're not open late, and we don't have super high ABV beer or like real liquor because we don't really want to. Like that's not our vibe. That's not our culture. We don't really want to.
You don't want to be
drunk
like a
people.
bar.
Yeah, no, we're not a bar. It's like I hate that word. Yeah, I mean, like I love bars.
Really?
I don't think of this space at all as a bar. I think of it more as a house, as like a destination, as a community place. I mean, I don't think of it as a bar at all. Yeah.
Are customers receptive of low ABV? I know as a drinker, like I found myself in the last couple of years, like starting on the far right column and looking at ABV first, and then working my way back and being like, okay, like that's the ABV I want, and oh, cool, that I'll have that style as well.
I think so. I think our customers are. I think, of course, there's an audience of people out there who like the higher ABV beers, but we get a lot of feedback that people enjoyed the fact that that's an option. You know, there's places you go to, it's not even an option. For us, it's a big part of our menu, but there's bars and breweries that it's 10 doubles on and maybe a stout or whatever. But I mean, it's not really a hard sell. It is, I will say, it's harder in packaging. When it comes to packaging, people like our Foeder Pilsner does really well in package, but in terms of volume, when we do what I call like the hypier styles, a double IPA or a sour IPA, fruity sour IPA, the volume is not the same. I mean, the fruited and the doubles, it is what it is. The market, they sell like crazy.
Yeah.
So, but on premise, it's a lot more consistent. Like our Wit, which is one of my favorite beers. That's the one I was alluding to before, called Gather House, which
that's the first beer you made.
Yeah. We released that at the same time with a Foeder saison, but yes, it was first release. We keep that on tap all the time, and it's like right there with our double IPAs. It's very, very popular on draft. Very popular. So yeah.
What do you attribute that to, though?
There's a market for it. There's people that enjoy drinkable, approachable beers. I mean, look at Allagash White. That's really what I built that beer after, which is just the pinnacle of that style. I'm a huge Allagash fan, and I'm a huge fan of that beer and everything they do, really. But there's clearly a market for that style. It's not a style that you see hype breweries ever brewing, but I just think it's a beautiful style of beer. I mean, you got the yeast that's going to come right in the forefront. You got all those cool esters coming out from the yeast, and then spices and coriander and orange peel, and we do our own little tweak in there that we think makes that beer special. And a nice wheat base. It's got that balance of being soft and delicate. It's got a great aroma, great flavor, and super drinkable, low ABV. I think that appeals to the craft beer aficionado and the, like, hate to say it, but the Blue Moon drinker, or just like
Rob Todd has gone on the record saying that like his brewery wouldn't have been as successful because of Allagash White if not for Blue Moon.
Sure, yeah, because he had to educate people on
or
that style
something
at the
like
time.
that. But he definitely has not dismissed that beer.
Yeah, and well, for us, that's Allagash White did all the work because we're a lot younger, and so now like people are familiar with that style mostly because of Allagash White. So
that's interesting.
Yeah,
and you can sell people on that of like, if you like Allagash White, if you've heard of Allagash White, which is the generation before you and before that, always had to mention one of the larger macros probably if they were trying to get into something. When I first got here, you were walking me around the space, and we were talking about generations. We were talking about breweries that have come before, and whatever generation we're headed into right now. I think that 19 and 20 could be, from what I'm seeing, important years in the next generation of brewers, in the same way that 1986 was and 1996 was. I think just because of everything that's happening in the world right now, the breweries that are opening right now could have an impact. And when we think about breweries like Allagash that have brought Belgian style wit ale into the forefront, or you go back and you think about Dogfish and Stone and what they did with IPAs, or you think about Sierra Nevada with Pale Ale back in the day. I'm not asking you to take on too much of a mantle for your very nascent generation as it were, but what sort of mark do you want this brewery to have in beer?
For us, it's making the destination and even the aesthetic from a branding point of view, but also just on premise, experiencing the beer here, and then just the way we communicate on social media. Like, aesthetic is very important to us. Speaking to our customer, so having all of that tie into the beer. So like, rather than it just being a beer, because beer's been brewed for, I don't know, millions of years, thousands of years, whatever.
Millennium.
So so
maybe not millions.
I don't know. It's forever, right?
Okay,
so for me, at least,
as long as there's been recorded history.
Yes. Yeah. So, I think that's still an underexplored concept, where it's connecting the beer to the land. So the concept of terroir, which we touched on a little bit. For us, our farmhouse beers, we get excited as making the beer and talking about portfolio, just design. We feel we can offer something that hasn't been seen by the market. So you can come here and have a beer that you're not going to be able to get anywhere else, which is cool, because we all can make IPA, but IPA is going to be pretty consistent across the country.
You'd hope, yeah.
Yeah. So, for us, it's connecting them to the space, connecting them to the experience, even more so than what I think has been done in the past. I think there's a lot of breweries that focus really hard on the beer and then kind of neglect having a beautiful experience in a beautiful space, which is something we put right next to our beer. Like, beer should be top quality, but at the same time, we want people to come to our brewery and be blown away by the experience in the space that they're in. So I think connecting that, yeah.
Do those go hand in hand? I
For
was
us,
saying
they
before,
do,
I had your beer before I came up here, and walking into this space, it made sense to me that the beer fits in with your aesthetic. It's not like a disjointed thing. And I mean, you're talking about social media, and you're talking about putting stuff out there. This doesn't feel like marketing to me, though.
Well, for us, it's just an expression of who we are. So, right, it's just the way. It's so easy to communicate with your consumer this day. Like, for us, it's just as simple as a post. Like, this is what we're doing. This, we're opening up our tasting room, and people are like, "How do you advertise?" We didn't advertise at all. We just posted, and it's word of mouth. And so, I completely lost my train of thought there. I'm sorry.
Well, no, circle the square with beer and place hand in hand.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I think when you think about the styles of beer that we're making, they are a representation of our space. They're a representation of our land. I mean, we didn't even talk about harvesting yeast from our property, but we find yeast on our property, we prop it up, And then again, fermenting in oak, the local ingredients. We didn't even touch on the beauty of Warwick and the richness of the agriculture of Warwick, which is just a whole nother
Well, I wanted to get into
thing.
that, but yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, connecting the beer to the land, and then having, as long as that's part of your core mission and that's communicated right off the bat, then I think people can just experience the beer and still have a sense of who we are. Like a lot of people who come here and have not tried the beer, we briefly touched on this earlier, but like they feel like they're in Vermont, which is great. And then I've sent beer to people who are beer friends, and they're like, this beer reminds me of Vermont beer. And I'm like, that's awesome. So like,
who said that? You can say that. The geeks will appreciate it. Yeah.
That was Pete from EQ. He's like, yeah, this reminds me of Vermont beer. I'm like, that's awesome. He hasn't even been here yet, but he's like, I feel like this is Vermont.
What does that mean though? Because you got excited by that.
Vermont's beautiful. Vermont's beautiful, and that's what we want people. Like people don't realize when you're not here that you're gonna have you're gonna relax, because immediately you got the Appalachian Mountains in the backdrop that are just, you can't miss them. The beauty of the land is so much a part of our space that it's like we kind of put it in your face. So. And that's what I think Vermont is. I mean, I remember going to the first time to Hill Farmstead, and I thought I was lost, because I'm like, first of all, I'm going
everybody does that
right?
first
I'm
time.
like, so I'm going down this dirt road, and then you pull up, and it's like, this is just stunning. It's beautiful, and then the beer is beautiful, and it's like, it almost makes the beer better, and and vice versa. Like the beer makes the experience better. Like if those go hand in hand, and the space that you're enjoying the beer in is that stunning, then I think it actually enhances the overall experience. It enhances the beer as well, at least for me. I mean, I love going to Hill Farmstead. It's just like, it's a very unique experience.
When I get asked, and I do a lot, like what's the favorite beer you ever had? And it's never actually about just the liquid itself. It's always about the context that I had it in, and who I was with, and where I was drinking. And it could have just been a perfectly ordinary beer, but it's the that sense of it. Is it difficult then to have your beer, because you talk about space, you talk about here and drinking it here. Is it difficult then to have your beer out in the wilds and the bodegas of Brooklyn, in all of these other places where that message that you want to convey, can labels only go so far? People can read your mantra, but if there's police sirens out their window, or the kid is screaming down the hall, or you're looking at work emails while you're drinking, is it?
I mean, we don't.
Is there a worry?
It's not a worry. I think obviously just from a business perspective, it's helpful to have your beer off private. Like somebody needs to, yeah. And
the checks are nice.
Yeah, a check is nice, and also how do people know that we even exist here? Right? We're very young. How like most people don't know about Drownlands Brewery in Warwick, New York, right? So how do you get people aware of who you are and what you're doing?
Well, I mean, they will after this show. Come on.
Exactly.
The three guys who listen to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but no, I mean, it doesn't worry me, because one, it's going to be hard for us to do a lot of off-premise beer at this point anyway, just because our brew house is only so big, and we can move through it in our tasting room. But two, I think the places that we do send our beer to are very, very good places. We're lucky to have, New York City's not that far from us, and New York City's a big audience. A lot of people who come here actually come from New York City, because it's only,
as the crow flies, it's 50 miles?
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe a little less, but yeah. Yep. So, I mean, that's still our audience base, and New York City just has incredible bars, right? I mean, they get the best beer in the world. They can really get whatever. So to have, you can go down the list, Tourist, As Is, Proletariat, Blind Tiger, these amazing establishments. That's who we get. Those are the only people that we send beer to in New York City. So we're lucky enough that it's like, when we send that, we're sending some crazy stuff in, and they'll appreciate it, and actually,
and they'll sell it,
and sell it,
and it'll be received
exactly.
Well. Yeah,
exactly. So we're lucky in that sense that network is already there. Just because I think there's obviously a great scene in New York City, and then the Hudson Valley. If people aren't familiar with the scene, it's incredible. I mean, I think there's amazing beer coming out of New York, specifically the Hudson Valley. So
yeah,
so
I think it's one of the better beer regions in the country at this point.
Yeah, I think so too. So,
and so much of what you're trying to do comes from here. You briefly touched on it with harvesting yeast from here, which immediately makes it unlike any other beer that you're going to get anywhere else. But this is great farm country as well. I mean, we have orchards around us. There's, wonderful produce that comes from here. There's wonderful, everything in between. When it is peak growing season or before growing season, and I know you've only been around in this place for a year though, but you've been around it quite a bit. Where does inspiration come from when you're driving around or tasting or talking with farmers? Like what excites you when you want to create something new?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the idea of just taking what your land gives you, right? That's like what a true saison for me is. It's like how they made saisons back in the day. They didn't have the privilege of microbreweries back then. People were making their own beer, and if you were a farmer, you needed something that was going to quench your thirst and low ABV, and you brewed it with what you had available, like what you were probably growing yourself or what your neighbors were growing. So for us, part of that is like everybody else, you kind of just have to take what grows in your region and make the best of it to an extent. Like this year, I was really hoping to do a peach beer. And the peach harvest this year was just...
It got decimated.
It just didn't happen.
It was bad season for it.
Yeah, for sure. So, obviously, like we have wild stuff just sitting in oak right now that's just kind of awaiting cool and like local ingredients, right? Like we can add those later.
So it's just a base beer that's just sort of...
We can totally start with a base, yes.
Chilling out and...
Yeah, I mean, we want to let that beer sour for a while anyway, so...
In that sense, it's got to be good that you're the accountant.
In terms of what the profitability of the beer?
Like you just have stuff that's just chilling out, just waiting.
Oh my gosh.
Maybe.
Yeah, I think when I first looked at opening a brewery, I was like, man, I almost felt like I was opening like a distillery because like distilleries, right? Like I'm like, I don't know how they do that, where they like distill and they're like, we're not going to release anything for 4 years. It's like that's not great for cash flow.
Yeah.
That's basic economics there,
but now you can feel their pain.
Yeah. I mean, that's the nice thing about us having a balanced menu too, is like our way, we can crank that out in a couple weeks. That's not a big deal. So, but yeah, I mean, our wild stuff, it doesn't have to be our moneymaker. But I think because we do it, I think it makes us kind of who we are. And, even if it's a smaller volume of what our total business is, that's okay. It's feasible. It's doable.
Yeah.
We charge a little bit more for it too. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think people understand that as well.
Yeah, they do.
Time equals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Some people. Yeah.
Yep. Where you are there, is that a tough conversation to have with people?
I think being a destination brewery, I think you want to keep your prices. Like we definitely don't want to just have everything be a 750 milliliter bottle that's super expensive. It's $20-$25 or whatever.
Yeah.
So we have some super, like our Pilsners are $5-$6, which is like, I think people actually have told us,
yeah,
they're surprised. They like actually thought our beer was gonna be more expensive than it was. So again, just having balance in the menu, I think if there is someone here who's price sensitive, then you just kind of steer them towards more a price sensitive beer. It's probably not the right beer for them, and that's okay. So it's not too hard of a sell.
We're at this weird part in COVID. The whole thing's been weird. But we're starting to get into the cooler months again, and people are worried about a resurgence, which based on the numbers in this area look likely. A lot of plans got put on hold. A lot of people, I think it's great news that you were able to open 5 weeks ago here, and I think it's awesome that people are coming out and hopefully being smart when they're here. If and when all of this is said and done, and we can get back to, let's just say January 2020, when the world felt, weird but normalized-ish. What's on the horizon? What didn't get done that you want to get done, that you're excited about?
There's so much more for us to do here. I mean, we're so young. Just like for us, just getting the tasting room open was a big goal, and we just got that done. But there's a ton more we could do with our outdoor space.
It's just a concrete truck. It's fine. This is the fun of like recording on location, which I've only done 2 or 3 times now, I think, since COVID hit. So yeah, I you all can bear with the concrete truck in the background while Mike and I have this conversation because, damn it, I'm at a brewery right now. So just deal with it. We're almost at the end anyway. So yeah.
I think food is a big thing. That's a big, like, again, going back to if you're a destination, I think food just makes sense. So that's something I'm actually looking forward to building out. We want to, I don't know that we'll ever be really a restaurant per se.
Right.
But anything that could be fermented, so cheese, bread, anything involving yeast really.
That's
sauce,
exciting.
Yeah, like house-made fermented sauces that are just that. I mean, that's where my mind starts going, and then harvesting like the agriculture, because we talked about how this is farm country. Just getting in local ingredients and using those. So a food program is on the horizon. That's a big thing, and that's a big undertaking.
Yeah.
We need to expand our brew house. That's a big project.
Already.
We do, yeah. We're making as much beer as we can, as fast as we can.
Did you expect that to happen?
Not as quickly as it happened, no. I really had no idea what to expect with 2020, right? It's a weird year. And then opening a brewery at any time, like, you don't know what to expect, right? Like, you hope people buy into what you're doing, but it's not a guarantee. And then on top of that, there was added variables this year that was like, we just don't know, right? We don't know how comfortable people are going to be going out. So I did not expect to go through as much beer as we did as quickly as we did. But obviously a good problem to have, but still something that, like, anyone who's built a brewery before knows. It's like getting in a bunch more tanks and expanding is not a simple, easy thing to do. It's doable, but
yeah.
So that's on the horizon. And then, I think just kind of continuing. I'd like to get a little bit of beer into New Jersey. We don't distribute a whole lot. We distribute to New York City,
right,
Albany area, good bars in that area. And I think there's a few in Jersey, so maybe just a little bit more there. But
be nice.
Yeah.
Just saying, like, we're right next
I love
door.
Jersey.
Yeah. Thanks for sitting down with me today.
No
I
problem.
really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, and thanks to the concrete truck as well. But it's nice to see progress happening in this area.
Yeah, for sure. Yep.
So,
Yep.
Thanks again.
Yeah, thank you. Cheers.
That's Mike Kraai of Drownlands Brewing in Warwick, New York. If you're in the area, need a pint, and want to be far from people, go check out the brewery, choose from one of the 16 taps, and spend a relaxing bit away from it all. I'm already looking forward to my next visit. Who's inspiring you these days? Who's just crushing it when it comes to good beer, atmosphere, and philosophy? Send me a note and tell me about it. The email is johnholl, that's JOHNHOLL, @beeredge.com, or tell me on Twitter @John_Hall. And also, please remember to leave a review of this show to help others find it, and be sure to check out beeredge.com for news, podcasts, and to sign up for the newsletter. And also remember, Steal This Beer every Monday, the BYO Nano podcast on the 15th of each month, and to download the Beer Edge podcast with Andy Crouch. With all of that, your beer needs are absolutely covered. Nate Schweber does the music for this show. Jeff Quinn designed our logo. I'm John Hall. New episodes of this show release every Wednesday, and that's when I'll be back again with you to drink beer and to think beer.